And we are live, folks, with another episode of the Survival Podcast in Bitcoin Breakout. I have Johnathan Kohn with us today, who I know from a variety of things. We're going to be talking about the refugee crisis in Venezuela today and the role that Bitcoin plays in solving problems like that. We're also going to talk about Bitcoin in general, how John got involved with it, and he's actually deeply involved with Bitcoin on a great deal of levels. We'll have him on in just a minute. Before that, I wanted to go ahead and remind you guys about our two sponsors of the day today. Sponsor of the day number one today is Start9 Embassy Servers. They've been with us a long time, guys. They've been sponsoring the show now for a couple years. They just came out with the latest in embassy servers. And this is a way to take back your digital sovereignty beyond just the fact that, yes, you can run a Bitcoin node. Yes, you can run a Lightning node. But that is only just the beginning of what you can do with Start9. You basically can get rid of the concept of cloud computing where somebody else controls your data, your access, and tracks your movements. We can do things on the Tor network. We can stay completely private about what we're doing. We can be our own everything. They have an expanding marketplace. Installing stuff on your embassy server is about the same as installing an app on a smartphone. Really easy to do. And again, this is something that it's way more important, I think, than people realize, that we begin to control our own data in the modern world. And this is like, recently I was talking to Adam Curry about embassy servers, and he was like, how does it compare to Umbrel? And I'm like, well, I don't know how to do everything on my own with Umbrel, etc., but I can get a Start9 server, plug it in, follow the instructions, and start running all my own services. So it makes it more accessible to everybody. Next up today, we're talking about Bitcoin. And when you hear wallets and Bitcoin, you think about something that we keep access to our Bitcoin in. But what about the wallet you actually carry around every day? You know, like the one that I'm carrying around right here from Ridge Wallets. Ridge Wallet is a great way to keep your data secure, because all of these little cards and things that we have in here today, they have RFID tags. They can be sniffed for about $18 worth of parts you can buy on eBay. Or you can get one of these and you can protect it. And Ridge has really grown since they started working with us about 5 years ago. It's not just a great company for a very secure, very minimalist wallet, but a great overall EDC company. Definitely worth checking out. Remember, Ridge Wallet does do a discount for 10% off everything that they sell for my members. And Start9 Computing, 9% off all the embassy servers. So you go on the smallest option, that'll cover an entire year of membership just from that one option. With that, I want to bring our special guest on today, Johnathan Kohn. I know Johnathan as BitPetro, and I know him mostly from the fact that he is the guy that founded our local Bitcoin meetup. We're going to be talking about the work that he's been doing to help solve the humanitarian crisis in Venezuela. That involves Bitcoin and a bunch of other stuff today. But with that, John, welcome to the Survival Podcast and Bitcoin Breakout. Are you muted, John? Did you mute yourself?
I did mute myself. All right, there we go. Hey, thanks for having me, and super excited to be on. Fan of the podcast. I do a little gardening myself, so I appreciate all the knowledge you drop.
Well, hey, man, I'm glad to have you on today. Let's start off with, can you tell people, how did you personally get involved with Bitcoin in the first place?
I first heard about Bitcoin in 2010 and immediately dismissed it as Minecraft money.
Okay.
And then again, I came into it through just purchasing stuff on the dark web and that sort of stuff, and had to interact with it to play in those worlds, and eventually got curious enough to start looking at mined a little bit on my computer, and then did some of the very earliest shared mining, where you'd go out and you'd purchase a share of a mining server. And then, somebody would host it for you. It wasn't cloud mining, although that was available at the time. But this is probably early 2013.
Okay. So that's about the same time that I got involved on any serious level. It's kind of like you. I was aware of it. This can't be that good. And it was about 2013 that I started taking that deeper dive into it myself. Your background is actually in like the oil and gas industry, though, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So at the time, I was vice president of an oil company, and I helped to arrange the first sale of working interest for Bitcoin. That would have been in towards the end of 2013. But yeah, primarily acquisitions and just land and developing, drill sites.
Yeah, yeah, and eventually, I guess you saw a crossover with that.
A couple from the, part of my being in a small company involved raising money for drilling these wells. And so we would go to the conferences, and I was always looking at another angle for fundraising. And I saw Bitcoin as a very frictionless way of receiving funds from, say, foreign entities. It made a lot of that transactional process much smoother. You could set up escrow accounts. I mean, that was available then. And so BitPetro actually was born from the idea that we were going to offer a Bitcoin like settlement desk for deals, where you would be able to go out and kind of mirror what we had done, where you purchase like a percentage of a well, and then we would charge a percentage to either party and then just get out of the way.
Mm. Mm. And how does this lead you eventually to working with Bitcoin in an attempt to address the refugee crisis in Venezuela? How does that tie back to that? It seems like a pretty divergent thing.
Yeah. So, you get burned a lot and you get humbled a lot by Bitcoin. And so after having kind of gone down the, more profit seeking route, I decided to kind of take a step back and look at the educational side of this and see if there was anything that could be done. Because when I would travel to Venezuela, it was very obvious to me. I would tell my family, hey, Bitcoin's $20, Bitcoin's $200, buy some Bitcoin. It's going to hold its value better than the Bolivar. So even, back then it was always obvious to me. I would tell my family members and try to convince as many as I could that were there to try to use it. And then eventually I saw a crypto dude on YouTube talking about how he was going to set up a project in Cucuta to help the refugees in Cucuta. And that kind of tugged at me, particularly because I'm, half Colombian, half Venezuelan, born in Venezuela. And by religion, I'm Jewish. So the plight of a biblical size exodus out of one of my countries into the other country kind of tugged at me a little bit. And then being a army, veteran and a medic at that, kind of, there's a service component to that you get left with that really drove me to do something about it. And so I joined that project. That project, because it was crypto based, failed. And we came back to Bitcoin being the answer. And so we would take money from these crypto projects and convert it into Bitcoin lessons and lessons about how to utilize these new tools as a refugee. And we started doing lessons on the street that were very basic. Just how does this work without internet? And that was the birth of Cripto Conserje, is going out to a street vendor. His name is Johnathan. And we've got the video on our channel on YouTube, and you can see him learning about a Bitcoin wallet, a paper wallet, and then basically making a sale online for that paper wallet. Not online, I'm sorry, in person. For exchange for goods. And we facilitated the exchange for fiat to him after the lesson. That was our initial model. From there, we grew, to like 5 people to 10 people. And eventually we were able to I think impact more than 900 people in all.
And this is like, we're back into South Central America, looking at this part of the world. There's a lot going on with Bitcoin and crypto as a whole throughout the region. But this is a very different thing than what's going on, let's say, in El Salvador. El Salvador, relatively stable environment, far more so in recent years. There's a lot of debate on how the gang activity's been handled by the president there, but it has been beaten back a lot. And it's more of like, hey, let's do this thing because it's valuable to us. It helps with the fact that the U.S. is inflating the dollar, but we don't get any of the, the bailout money or anything like that. So we get the pain, but none of the pleasure. And it was more of like a market based. Let's see what we can do with this. Where this is much more we don't have a lot of alternatives given the situation that we're in with the refugee crisis, right?
I mean, first, I want to really drive some attention to the crisis because I don't think it's very well understood or known about. It's not talked about in the media.
Yeah.
We're talking about the largest humanitarian crisis in the history of the Western Hemisphere. The recent numbers put 8 million Venezuelans having been displaced from their country and fled. For reference, that's 30 million total population, approaching 30% of the country, fleeing.
Imagine 8 million Texans leaving Texas. That's about the same ratio.
Yeah, I mean, it's mind-boggling. Some of the numbers out there, Venezuelan refugees are literally a country outside of a country. There are nations that, in Colombia, there's 2.4 million refugees. That's more than the population of, a lot of small countries. Panama's 4.4 million. Costa Rica's 5.1 million. Just the numbers, around the mountain range that, by the way, you're to leave from Cucuta to Bucaramanga, you have to cross a peak where people die of just, frost, of just, freezing to death. People are leaving Venezuela with the clothes on their back or with bags representing money because the inflation is so crazy. I looked it up today. To year to date, it's 57% inflation, but it's these just sharp drop-offs in the way that the government adjusts the currency rate. And that's not even the real currency rate. That's what's accessible to, the people in power. The regular person is experiencing 1 million, 2 million% inflation. So it's a total economic collapse that's leading them to leave. And then when they get to wherever they're going, they're irregular citizens. So they don't have any status to work. So, I mean, you end up with people just roaming, right? And squatting. And that's the reality for 8 million people. Recently, about a month ago, the U.S. closed its doors specifically to Venezuelans. I believe it's Title 42 is the name of what passed. But I mean, certainly closing the doors off to the place where they're walking a distance, to put it into perspective, from the East Coast of the United States, from Boston to LA. That's what these people are walking to get to, the border of the United States, where they believe they're going to have the answers. That's the promised land. Mm-hmm. And so that's the crisis. It started because of an economic, and socio political movement that is the Maduro regime. And they're basically, they're just pirates. I don't know how else to put it. Yeah.
I think it's important for people to understand how fast that went downhill. I remember 15 years ago, one of the great expat retirement countries was Venezuela. Like, there were articles about how great it was to retire in Venezuela and go live on Margarita Island, and how much further your money went, and how great the country was, and how modern the country was. And so Bush was president when I was reading about this. So it's a while ago, but it's not that long when we look at historical perspective, to a complete catastrophic human disaster. And no one was bombed or invaded in war. This was an internal shift in politics that created what is one of the greatest humanitarian disasters that's ever happened. We didn't have a comet hit or a giant series of earthquakes or a volcano. This was a human-made decline in the standard of living for the entire country.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking by oil reserves, the wealthiest country in the world.
Yeah.
Um,
Per capita,
that
definitely, yes.
that doesn't come close to all of the other mineral wealth that's there. It doesn't account for, like you were saying, the tourism. Venezuela was one of the leading places to go because it's gorgeous there.
Yeah.
And now it's basically left to only those in power, and everybody else is fleeing from hunger. So back to what we were trying to do is we were trying to educate the people that were crossing the border with these bags of currency, that as soon as they crossed, many times the guards there would be like, yeah, you can leave that half right there.
Yeah.
Go ahead. And that's the toll to pass. So I mean, if you look at some of the images, people will forego that bridge crossing to literally cross the river with beds and refrigerators and whatever they could carry on their heads. So that's what happens when you reach collapse. And so Cripto Conserje had decided to do something about it, and our mission was pretty simple. It was just to reach people through Bitcoin classes that basically covered very, very short, concise lessons that they could walk away with. Primarily, it was to disprove the petro. Back then, the petro was a thing that was going on. Venezuela had released its own master of all shit coins, and basically supposedly had raised $5 billion and some nonsense. Our project actually audited their blockchain and found a transaction from 1969. So go figure. It was clearly the first blockchain in 1969.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, just that's the status quo for anything coming out of the Venezuelan government, right?
Yeah.
It's just all lies and posturing. But yeah, so our education was basically to show people, here, touch it, feel it, taste it. This is how this works, and leave them with, having had $5 worth of food or medicine that would translate for them for a week's worth of food, or a pack of medicine that could get them up the mountain.
And the organization itself is Cripto Conserje. Is that how you say that?
Cripto Conserje. And that,
okay.
Yeah, that
with the accent, but
Conserje is concierge. So the idea for us was always to be a concierge service for the merchants. And we started really looking at, could we do this in the brick and mortars? Unfortunately, the regulatory framework for paying your taxes doesn't exist. So de facto, you were breaking the law if you received crypto. And so it was very complicated back then for us to really push in that direction. It's much easier now. There's been a lot more development. Colombia's had a lot of pioneering work in that space from the exchanges and other companies that work in that region. But back then it was a challenge. And so we decided to work with the informal merchants and teach them and focus on that side of the world. And we had, great collaborations. Again, we started by taking the money from crypto projects and explaining to them, look, this is a Bitcoin first thing, and we'll talk about your project, but we're teaching people about Bitcoin.
Yeah. Yeah. And so are you primarily then working with people once they're in Colombia?
Yeah, we can't really set foot in Venezuela because
Venezuela, you're gonna get shot.
Yeah, you're just not able to operate there safely. And actually that's what caused us to stop operations altogether. We were a victim of our own success. The project got so big that 100, 300 people with 5 people working there, just it kind of adds up to a bad situation when you're giving out food and medicine, and then you say there is no more. So we decided to stop physical operations. We did a little bit more work going into NGOs and other people and to teach them how to accept Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But then we kind of shifted focus into the Humanitarian Center, which is our current project. So we're seeking to build a Bitcoin Humanitarian Center. And yeah, we've recently formed the 501c3 in Texas to help fund that goal.
So I think one of the things that people don't really get, because there's so many parts of the world where even the poorest people have smartphones and access to the internet, this part of the world is a place where still like a ton of these people do not have a phone. They do not have an internet. They don't have anything like that. And you're teaching them how to use Bitcoin. And so you already made a comment about using Bitcoin, using paper wallets without the internet. I think this would be a really interesting topic for my folks, because when they shut the internet down. Okay, well, if they shut the internet down, most people would say this, like, I'm like, well, you're going to die, right? Like, because you're not going to be able to function at all. It's usually like a phantom objection. But there is a legitimate concern, like, can we use Bitcoin without internet access? And it's kind of, sort of, or is there, like, how do you guys handle that?
So 2 answers here. One, you definitely still need internet. Right? Like this is a fog issue, not a complete cutoff issue.
Yeah.
At a complete cutoff, you cannot effectively be doing transactions on chain. So there would not be a way for you to use Bitcoin then, other than maybe walking to somewhere with an internet connection and then broadcasting your transaction from there.
Okay.
So let's just state some basics. Yeah. That said, most of these people have endpoints that give them access to the internet. So there might be a house that has 20 phones, only one of them has internet access, and they may use it as a hotspot. So, or they may have to go to the local internet cafe or something like that to get access, but they will eventually get access. So what you need to do is you need to provide them a way for maybe using and keeping the coins offline, so that they can more effectively, keep them safe or transact with them. Like, say, for example, load a paper wallet with a certain amount and then use that. And that way they can easily interchange, a bill and not have trust issue there. All of that to be said, that paper wallets are not very safe, right? They're inherently, have problems. And really, we want to start using some of the later technology. This is pre-Lightning. So we had to use other cryptos back then, primarily because a lot of the value would be lost in a Bitcoin transaction.
Sure.
Because the cost per transaction was pretty high back then.
Yep.
Today with the Lightning Network, that's a completely different topic. So we plan to take full advantage of that now. But for the more practical use, we also work with SMS messaging for using the transaction ability without internet, but with maybe a relay in between. And that was a project called Cointigo that helped us kind of be that bridge so we could use SMS phones, non-internet phones, to still give people Bitcoin.
It's interesting that there was a lot of work done that was really innovative in that delta there, where Bitcoin didn't have the scale for small transactions. And then a lot of it, like Lightning, has kind of made that not necessary. Yeah. Like one of my friends, a gentleman named Vin Armani, he developed Cointext. So it was Bitcoin Cash over text. And today it doesn't exist anymore. Like, there's just not, like, it seemed like, hey, this solves a problem like you're talking about. And today we're getting to a point where it's becoming less of an issue. But it's interesting how many things were cobbled together as get-bys on that interim delta, just as an aside. But so my understanding from what I read about it, like, the person would have the paper wallet and maybe they didn't have internet access all the time, but the merchant they would deal with would. So they would take the paper wallet to the merchant. And like you said, it is inherently unsafe, because if somebody takes it from you, they can get your Bitcoin, because they have both sides of the information there. They have basically it's a public and private key for a certain amount of Bitcoin.
The funny part, though, is that gives the older generation a tangible thing to hone in on, right? Like, and so then you can access, for example, one of the biggest lessons that I got in doing all of this was when talking to people, using simple language that doesn't involve any of the technical babble, and saying, a grandma was telling us, "Hey, mijo, why don't you just use the phone card analogy?" And we're like, "What?" And I'm like, "It's a phone card. If you drop a phone card on the street, what happens? It's gone, because you have the code, so you can use it. So the phone number is your public key. The the other one is your private, and you have to
Ah,
keep those safe because content, having access to those two things gives you access to the funds. And so it's an idea that they already work with. You're just massaging it into, okay, now this is a new thing, and it's doesn't use a phone, but it does keep money in the internet.
yeah.
So it was a good lesson for us, and just kind of keeping things simple and kind of bringing it back to a more tangible example.
Um, you guys have had a large number of like events and things that you've hosted there. Like how much? What's the impact been? Things like that.
Yeah, so we ran 9 total events, and we helped about 900 people. So that scaled up. That wasn't 100 per event. And eventually we just had to roll down the events and just shut them down. And we raised about $12,000, which we used to purchase land just outside of the city, where we plan to build a humanitarian center.
Very, very cool. And then you had an airdrop. What was Airdrop Venezuela Live? What was that?
Yeah, that was a collaboration with AirTM and with an artist called Cripto Graffiti, where we combined one of our events, one of our lessons, with it was an active art exhibit that was expressing dissent for the Maduro regime, while also educating people about, bringing down Maduro figuratively and literally through tearing down Venezuelan bolivars that were painted as the mural. And so it was a very just a master job by Crypto Graffiti on organizing and thinking this up. There was even a online component where when you donated, you actually were able to choose the bill that you got somebody to tear off and donate at that, like a little brick, like a little building brick, except in reverse. And so that project split the funds between AirTM and Cripto Conserje, and we used those funds to purchase the land. They went on to use their funds for a series of airdrops that they did with their customers. So yeah.
So if you guys are able to successfully meet your fundraising goals and build this building on the land that you already have acquired, what do you envision, like its daily act? Like what does the person backing it get as the ROI? Not that they get it personally, but what do they know is now happening? What does this place become? What is its mission? What does it look like when someone shows up there and says, help me out? Or how would that work?
So the land is basically on the route from Cucuta down to Bogota. So that is the exit point for Venezuelans.
Okay.
And it's not on the road itself. It's about a 30-minute walk off the main drive. And that's going to give us that security component that we're not just going to get overwhelmed. We're going to see people coming. We're going to be doing something about crowd control with that. And it's not if these people are walking for days and days, if they hear about our project and it's a 30-minute additional walk to get to us, it's not a terrible ask.
Yeah.
And so we are first going to set up classes that basically mirror exactly what we were doing before, where it's a $5 donation to each person. That person has to answer 3 questions correctly. Those questions are basic Bitcoin questions. What is Bitcoin? What is a public-private key? And what is a mnemonic phrase?
Okay.
Right? We can't ask them too much more, and that's about what they need to use this thing. And then the real lesson, the thing that we're really doing for them is actually giving them the Bitcoin, making them do the transaction, and getting that I touch it, I felt it, I tasted it thing. Because then it's engraved in their head that this actually is real, and it wasn't just something that somebody explained to them. So that's the real lesson that the individual person gets. And then the humanitarian component is the food and or the medicine that they're exchanging with the merchant, right? So that's the most basic structure for one of our classes. we plan to slowly kind of ramp that up with more theme-driven things like children education, like maybe tech garage shop stuff, more like dev-oriented work.
Okay.
But initially, it's just what can we do to help them on their journey. We can give them access to a global, censorship-resistant, safe monetary network. We can teach them about being able to enter and exit this network, maybe even keep stable coins with them. I know that that's not a popular topic amongst Bitcoiners, but the reality is if I gave somebody a bank account access in this part of the world without access to a brick and mortar bank, I could be saving their life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is more important than me driving, any point home that I'm going to make.
Yeah.
So
no, you're not going to get hatred from me on stable coins for sure. I live for the day that we don't have to talk about them anymore, but we're not there yet.
Well, and they already understand that, right? Like
Yeah.
they're already in a economic environment where they're swinging from one jurisdiction to another. So they already have to switch from currency to currency.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not explaining anything too complex there. And so really the next step is once we have given them classes, we will bring some of the more talented ones to be merchants and to teach other Cripto Conserje, I guess teaching teachers, right? That's the concept.
Yeah.
And we're able to spread out through that entire migration route, the idea that, hey, you can transfer money and you can transfer services and you can keep value like this. We feel that that's probably enough for the scope of what we can do. We would love to work with other organizations to do more. And we probably will do a little bit more for a select few individuals, like maybe give them some housing at the location for a few days or something like that. But that's going to be on a case-by-case basis. That we really don't have the funding to support any more than just the operations of a few classes a week.
Yeah. But this gives people something to anchor on in their new home, at least temporary home. Like back to the scale here. So 8 million people have fled Venezuela.
Mm-hmm.
If your numbers, I think I remember about 2.2 million have gone to Colombia. Colombia, off the top of my head, is somewhere in a 50 million population for themselves.
Yep.
So you're looking at 4%.
This is why it's a crisis, right?
Population inflow. So like that would be like 40 million people. No, that would be like 100 million people coming to the United States, right? 4% of no, I'm sorry. It wouldn't be that much. 12 million.
Yeah, 12 million.
That would be an inflow of 12 million in a 2-year period to the United States.
And again, adding the scale.
Let's be not looking down at anybody's nose or anything, but like Colombia is not the United States. Colombia does not have the resources of the United States. Colombia does not have anywhere near the capability of the United States per capita to deal with a crisis like this. So now you've got another 2 million people sitting there that have nothing, and you're trying to give them something, some starting point.
It's not just Colombia. I mean, Costa Rica, El Salvador. I mean, every country along the way is receiving these people, and they stop wherever they can stop, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, you would. I mean, that's if it's better than where I came from, and I don't think it's going to necessarily get better if I keep going, and nobody will hurt me here. I'll try to figure it out. That's the story of people think that this is a new thing, but this story of people having to flee en masse. You know, you mentioned the Jews of the Bible. Okay, that's another example. But history is littered with thousands upon thousands of stories of this type of thing happening over time, and it's shaped the entire face of the earth. And when people end up in a new place, you can either bitch about it and say they shouldn't be here, which doesn't do anything, or you can figure out something for them to do to be productive.
Yeah. So that's the goal is giving them a tool to be productive, right? If they're an informal merchant, they have they have an additional payment rail now that they can use. If they're a formal merchant and we are working with health organizations and with aid organizations, we can provide direct aid and send them to these merchants and give them the ability to purchase and create economic impact, right? Like that's how we fix this. It's not going to get fixed with, a Band-Aid. It's going to get fixed with dollars. It's going to get fixed with money.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have a term in the notes that I have here from you, proof of work philanthropy. I like the term, but tell me what it means.
So as part of our new team for the 501c3 and our new mission and goal, we're integrating a lot of mining to what we're doing. And so our thought was to raise funds from public miners and from entities through hash power donations. And so we believe that that's a novel way of promoting a project that you want to support, because it is, giving the goose rather than the egg. And so we're able to, if we're donated hash power, whether it be in the machine or whether it be hash power through pointing us, hash power to our pool, then in essence, you're giving us the ability to not have to come back next year and ask you for more, right? We need to take those resources and drive them to their fullest. And that's proof of work doing philanthropy, right? Like that's how things should line up, so that when we're asking for more, it has long-term impact. And primarily that has to do with the fact that we're going to be giving away, $5 to a person.
Yeah.
That well has to replenish itself, and we have to do that from a certain somewhere. So mining is a fantastic way to highlight how Bitcoin can solve problems like this.
So it's basically someone donating, instead of straight up Bitcoin, donating some of their hash power to you for a period of time.
Sure. Or the machine itself. And again, as a 501c3, that has tax benefits for you.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a public miner, you already have these
so maybe I have some machines I'm fixing to upgrade, and I've got my older machines and they're not as valuable to me anymore, but I can write off a significant value of whatever I haven't appreciated yet over time.
Absolutely.
I see. Yeah, I get it now. I thought maybe it was more donating my hash power, but you're saying let's take older, like S9s or whatever, and donate the equipment.
It's all of it, right? I mean, when it's profitable and when we have the right, environment to mine profitably, we will, be custodians of that computer, right? And run it until it's profitable, until it's not profitable.
Yeah.
And then conversely, if it's better for us to take the miner and sell it to a market that will use it and turn that into funds, we will do that as well.
Okay. So there's multiple ways that you can then fund what you're trying to do. And I mean, obviously that's one way, but are there other ways people can help and learn more about the work that you're doing with this crisis?
Yeah. They can go to, all our socials. So YouTube, Twitter, and definitely the website. So criptoconserje.com. At the website, you can go at the very top and definitely don't do a direct donation. You can do a pledge for hash power, pledge your hash power to us. And there are forms there for both. And if you just want to get involved and learn more, again, you can do that as well. Just contact us, giving you ways for you to reach out. And, if you don't have sats to spare, or if you don't have hash power to donate, your time is valuable too. And we need people to make this thing happen.
It seems like long-term, it could become very self-sustaining, because some portion of these people that you're helping, you would think would become like successful alumni from a university that give back to the school that they went to. You would think that a lot of these people, maybe some part of the family can get out. This is often what happens in many countries. Some of the family members can get out, some can't. And then you have a form of remittance that is uncensorable. Or if that other family member has an eventual ability to get out, if they have been funded with Bitcoin and there's a knowledge within the family of how to use it, now it becomes part of family wisdom. Like, I can get out with my Bitcoin because you can't have it because it's not here. It's knowledge. It's a phrase. It's information, right? Like, you can't really take my Bitcoin from me. You don't even know I have it. So it seems like there's a whole system that could be eventually unleashed, and hopefully that these, new residents, members, whatever, of Colombia, for instance, can become productive members of Colombia. And I'm sure some hope to someday return. And that may or may not happen. There's people that are sitting in South Florida that still talk about one day going back to Cuba. And, I'd love you to have the opportunity, but I think, Grandpa, you're living in a past term like that. I don't know that that's really in the cards. There's no way to unwind history or rewind history. We have to deal with what we have.
And look, there's the path of El Salvador. They certainly have done an amazing job at turning it around.
Yeah.
So never say never.
Yeah.
But certainly, I don't know. Anecdotally, many Venezuelans would say that they want to go back, or that they would go back.
Yeah.
It's simply that, for your children, you wouldn't do that, right? Like, you just It's a situation.
And I think the problem in Venezuela and the problem that was in El Salvador are dramatically different. One was mostly an organized crime problem with a government unwilling to do anything about it because it was on the take. And the other one is a government-centric problem. So I don't know which one's harder or easier to solve, honestly, but I don't see that problem getting solved anytime soon. So we have to try to help people, where they are and with what they're going through in the world today. And I do appreciate you bringing the scope of this problem to people, because it isn't something that we hear about, because I don't think it aids the political agenda that we have in the United States right now to talk about this problem. If it did, I think you'd hear about it all the time. But anything that doesn't aid the political agenda, the media agenda, we just we'll brush that under the rug. Let's talk about something completely different, like the World Cup or something.
Well, but I mean, listen, this is top news right now, right? And this is the very confusing thing about this administration, is that we just heard that Exxon is going to be given permission to operate again in Venezuela. So we are living in times where we have an administration that's confused about their own energy policies. They're willing to punish the energy industry, the domestic energy industry, at all costs, while helping a government that is a despotic, tyrannical regime that is oppressing its own people.
It's like the financing balloon with cars. They drop the price and increase the interest. So they sanction Venezuela, but then they're going to pump oil out of Venezuela, which enriches the power elite in Venezuela. So it's right back where it all started.
It proves its economic sanctions, at least to a country like Venezuela. The only people it hurts is the public, right? Like,
generally speaking, that's the case.
Yeah. So unfortunate, but that is the hope in Bitcoin, right? That these people have a direct line that isn't controlled or surveyed. Maybe it's surveillance by the authorities in Venezuela, but with the Lightning Network, I think it's getting harder to do some of that stuff.
Yeah.
So
how many transactions can you ruthlessly track for empanadas and tacos? Right. Like, I mean, there's a point of, like, I think that's even with the proposed Bitcoin legislation with like the de minimis concept, there'll be 200. It's been bounced between $200 and $600 of anything less than that. We're just going to not say as a reportable event. Like, that's government basically saying, look, we know we have more limits than we'll ever admit to. Yeah.
No, all of these things are not accident, right?
Yeah.
It's not an accident that you're not hearing about this. It's definitely political. What is difficult to understand is why the scale is so bad, and nothing seems to be a coordinated effort to realize that this is a regional problem rather than a Venezuela problem, and that really this only leads to a worst outcome, because it's the not fixing it leads to issues like xenophobia and issues like crime, more crime, and you're coming from those people that are desperate.
Well, that comes down to this idea of, if people have nothing, they will do horrible things in order to survive, and specifically to feed their children. Like if you said to me, would you go over there and knock that dude's door in and steal his food? Absolutely not. But if I was looking at my grandson and I could see his ribs through his skin, I might. Right? And so if we don't deal with this issue, if we keep pretending it's not there, then all of the worst possible outcomes will become self-fulfilling prophecies. And I think that's something people struggle with understanding, because everybody wants to make it this divisive thing, the border being open and all. I think the border is a complete disaster. So I'm not defending it at all. But the other side of it is you have the issue. And in the end, we have a human issue with human beings involved. And if we don't accept that, then we are making the world worse for everybody. And I think that's something people I think they know that, but they don't want to know that at this point, right? They just want to point at the other person who didn't cause the problem as well and yell and scream at each other. And then the energy issue. Like I heard Brandon the other day say that he has approved something like 9,000 leases on federal land or something like that. Well, what they don't say is that they're all tied up in federal court, so nobody can drill on them, and they're not doing anything to fix that. So they're pretending that they're allowing access to American energy while closing off access to American energy to then let our company pump oil out of Venezuela to enrich the Venezuelan elite while this crisis rages, and doing absolutely nothing but pouring gas on the fire to make it worse with these sanctions. Because to me, sanctions is this thing that we've become way too comfortable with in the Western world, in my opinion. Sanctions are an act of war. And when I say that, people get really like, no, they lose their mind. No, you don't think it's an act of war because nobody did it to you. If there was a country with the economic power to put sanctions on the United States, and they did so, that caused the kind of suffering sanctions have caused all over the world, led by us, and it was being done to you and your kid, and I'm not talking about you personally, but Americans in general, and it was affecting your children, and they were going without food and medicine and electricity because of those sanctions, you'd be screaming for war.
Right? Look, I'd say
picking on the weaker kids is all that it ends up being, and the elite never suffer in these countries.
I'd say you're seeing that play out in Europe right now with Russia, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean, Germany's bending the knee because they have to, not because they want to.
Yeah.
Then they were bending the knee. Now they don't even have a choice to bend the knee because the pipeline's gone.
Yeah.
So
now they're importing the shit out of coal.
Right.
So, I mean, like as much as they can get, as fast as they can get it.
So the fiat mentality of running out and saying, hey, we're going to replace all of this energy with renewables, even though we know it's not sustainable, and then taking the cheap energy from the parties that are not your friends because it's cheap, ends up biting you really, really hard if you're the West. I think that's how sanctions are imposed on us. It's not, we can't do it, but somebody can certainly turn the sanctions around on us. And I think that's something that the West is starting to, get savvy to, is like, hey, this just doesn't work. I mean, every time we try it, it just slaps us right in the face.
There's kind of the old Buddhist mentality. You should never hurt anybody because you're only hurting yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Mm-hmm. And that's that. I mean, and so if you are going to hurt somebody, it better be surgical. It better be like, I'm cutting the finger off because it's got gangrene. So if you try to kill me, I will kill you back. But otherwise, don't hurt anybody. I mean, that's something I don't think that humanity has grown up enough.
Well, and the unintended consequence is, millions of people fleeing a country because the country doesn't have the economic backbone to support itself.
Yeah. Well, and who does flee? This is the other thing. This is like the brain and energy drain, right? So you got to think about the stuff you said people will do to get out of Venezuela into Colombia, right? Brave all this stuff. So who does that? Well, your most motivated people who have already had the most taken from them. So generally they were successful, right? Because if you were poor now and you're poor then, I mean, it's generally like you're motivated, you're people that'll take risks, you're people that can figure out a way to get out, because that's not exactly the easiest thing to do. My old man used to say, I guess it's part of where I get the whole prepper mentality. He said, if they ever shut the power off, about a third of these people are just going to lay down and die. They're just going to lay down and die. About a third of the people will cobble together and do whatever they're told. And then a third of the people are going to kill everybody else. Right. And that's what's going to happen. So your third of the people are people that go do something. And like when you have the country go through this, most of your refugees are the people that are capable of doing something. So then long term, you get this huge humanitarian crisis wherever it goes, but the country itself suffers for the loss of those people. And so it's just bad in every direction that you can look at it, right? If you think about it, like for the people that figured out a way to fit in and a way to do something, some of the most successful people, wealthy families today in the United States were South Vietnamese that got out at the very end and came to America with almost nothing, and yet they've built very successful businesses and lives because they were they're not back in Vietnam now, right? They're not there helping their own country, and so all of this is just it's like pulling the drain on the bathtub of humanity and watching everything go down the damn drain.
Unfortunately, it's even worse for the people that actually do leave, because a lot of them can't find a way to use their advanced degrees.
Yeah.
So, I mean, countless professors have been lost to other work because they have to feed themselves and feed their families. So yeah, it's a catastrophic, intellectual loss for the country. And we'll see. I mean, I don't have a very high hope that this will resolve itself anytime soon, which is why we operate on the doorstep of the way out for these people, because that's the doorstep for hope for them.
If anything, I think we're going to see more of it. I mean, the turn that just took place in Brazil is not necessarily the most encouraging thing, and maybe it won't turn into this kind of crisis, but generally full tilt socialism goes to this place. Like, especially in the less resource rich from a standpoint of diversity of resources a nation is, the quicker it happens. But like you said, with Venezuela, actually, they're incredibly resource rich, but there's a difference between having the resource and being able to capitalize on the resource, I guess.
Well, no, I mean, the Venezuelan story is this is what happens when you nationalize oil companies and basically expulse all of the talent that kept that equipment running.
Yeah.
And then when things got bad, everybody went and started tearing the stuff apart for parts. So when you are literally taking the copper from the lines to sell it,
yeah,
what
you're strip
what do you
mining
have
the
left?
system. You're strip mining the miner.
So it's not collapses. There's nothing left. That stuff is gone.
Yeah. The stuff and the people. It actually is eerily similar for me as someone of Ukrainian descent to starvation that was done by Stalin in the Ukraine, where they took over the farms, but they didn't know how to farm. And they got rid of all the farmers, and they brought a bunch of city people in the farm that didn't know how to farm. It's going to be the people's farm. And then everybody starved.
Yep.
And then people, again, you're harvesting the seed for next year as food for this year. It's exactly the same dynamic playing itself out, two different times in history and two different industries, but it's the same dynamic. Remove the brain trust, remove the incentive, and now all of a sudden, nobody really gives a shit. And whenever I talk about, coming down on government and people say, I'm too hard or whatever, tell me a time that you went to go to a large government facility like a DMV or something, you were excited to go deal with government employees. You're like, I can't wait to go down there today. That doesn't exist, because when a person has that kind of a job, they're only so motivated. And how motivated is that is not varied. And so everything falls apart. Oil extraction and refining is a very complex business. And for all the money those companies make, there's a ton of, smaller parts companies that lose their ass all the time. You have a background in that industry. It's a high risk industry that requires a lot of incentive and a lot of risk and a lot of talent. And if you remove the incentive and the talent and only leave the perception of risk, you get nothing.
Yep. Well, and the location of these facilities are important too, right? Like the oil from Venezuela only has a few places it can be processed, mostly here. And looking at the other side of it, the oil that we make is not suitable for processing here because our refineries are primarily designed for the heavier, more sour crudes, right?
Yeah.
So, and the products that you make from all of the different petrochemicals come from the heavier grades of crude that you get out. So, really, there's so many. This is such a complex situation. It's not economic. It's not social. It's not environmental. It's all of it. And so it needs both, a government arm addressing it, but it also needs voluntary support from the public for these people in this crisis, because there's really nobody else that's going to stand up for these people.
So you saying Venezuela doesn't have any refining capacity?
I believe most of their refineries have burned.
Oh, okay. So Venezuelan crude is probably being processed in Houston and Beaumont.
That's where most of it was refined for the vast majority of the history of Venezuela. Most of that crude was ConocoPhillips and Valero were the big companies in the United States that had those contracts. And yeah, I mean, I'm not sure of the state of where the refineries are in Venezuela right now.
Yeah,
there are some, but I know that a lot have had issues with generators going down and valves and pumps going down. And once that stuff goes down, it's gone.
Like you said, you get to a point where I got to feed my family. If this thingamajig, if I can get $5 for it as a scrap, I'm going to sell it. I don't care that it's a $50,000 part.
Yeah,
that goes on a rig. Yeah. So how can people find out more about the work that you're doing here? And then I want to transition to some local stuff.
Sure. So again, the website is Cripto, CRIPTO, Conserje, CONSERJE.com. And you can find us on Twitter, and you can find us on Medium, and you can find us on YouTube. We've tried to be pretty good about documenting all of our work on Medium, so you can find a lot there. And we're just students of Bitcoin, trying to bring the good word of Satoshi to the people and doing what we can.
And I will have links to everything that you sent me along with your guest app in the show notes today. That'll be on the audio stuff, folks. There's a link down in the video notes. It will be available about 1 hour after we finish the live version here. If you click on it now, we're not done yet, so it won't be there yet. I do want to talk a little bit about Fort Bitcoin, which is a local Bitcoin meetup group that you started. And I joined back this summer, been to a few of your meetups. They've been really great. What made you decide, like, hey, we need a Bitcoin meetup group on the Fort Worth side of the Metroplex?
So I beat myself up for not having done it sooner. I should have done this when I started Cripto Conserje, because I should have started, from first principles where I'm at. But having had that experience, I did want to bring some of that to Fort Worth. And then I had my friends email me and call me about this energy summit that TCU was hosting. And I attended this blockchain and energy summit, and they basically hardly spoke about Bitcoin. And it just galvanized me into, nope, my university is going to be talking about Bitcoin, not blockchain. And shortly after that, the mayor announced that Bitcoin would be a goal of the city as far as like mining Bitcoin, and kind of putting a flag in the sand as far as like a tech center. And so things timed out well for that. But really, it's just about bringing Bitcoiners together in Fort Worth. I felt like Dallas had more of the banker Dallas blockchain feel. And so Bitcoin fit more with the Fort Worth boots, cowboy hats, and guns motif. And so the West will win with Bitcoin.
It's a really great group of people too, and I love the way that you do it. Sometimes there'll be a discussion or whatever, but usually it's just people hanging out, getting to know each other, and having a couple adult beverages. And thanks to you, I discovered that amazing speakeasy themed bar in downtown Fort Worth called Thompson's Bookstore. That was pretty cool. I think that was the first one that I came to, and it's been pretty cool. Now, but you, I think I might actually be partially responsible for this because I tried to get Gary, the Bitcoin boomer, to do something with the sporting clays range that's down here off 820. You went ahead and did it, and we've got like a meetup coming first week of December that's at this gun place. You want to tell folks about that?
Yeah. So Fort Bitcoin, like you said, is our local Bitcoin meetup. We try to do it the second Tuesday of the month, usually around 5 or 6 p.m. 6 p.m. if we're doing it at a venue with alcohol or and food. In this particular one, there's going to be some classes associated with our event. So 5 p.m. will be the start time, and we're doing it at Defenders Outdoors, which is just north of the West 7th area. So you can go to Fort Bitcoin on meetup.com and get details there. But yeah, we're going to do a bit of hanging out and shooting some guns. The ladies it's a ladies' night, so the ladies will be getting free training from Defenders that they're doing, and so guns, Bitcoin, and girls.
So is this like bring your guns type of a meetup then?
Yeah, there is a range there, and I plan on bringing my weapon and doing a little practicing and using the range. But yeah, I figured we change it up a little bit this time. So typically what we do is we go to a new bar. Every time we try to highlight the best places in Fort Worth that, will have us and are good for talking and kind of hanging out. And so we've done quite a few that have been amazing downtown and at the stockyards. And so this time I heard you guys talking about the clay shooting range, and I just looked at their website and saw that they had something coming up at the same time as we did. I was like, yep, let's do it there.
And I'll make sure I have a link to the Fort Bitcoin meetup. I was trying to pull it up on the screen right now, but meetup.com is being a bitch with me right now. I'm not wanting to play nice, but I don't know. Maybe I'll bring a sidearm or two myself, because this will be for the indoor range at that time of day, obviously.
And they do rent weapons there as well, so you can go get a fully automatic and go have some fun.
Oh, I did not know they had full autos there.
They have a lot of fun toys there.
They have a lot.
Really nice range.
It's really fun. It's also expensive.
It is expensive, but again,
it's not expensive to rent the gun. It's expensive for the ammo when you start rolling.
Oh yeah. You can. I think they do let you bring your own ammo. So you just rent the range. But yeah, eventually we'll have to do one at the clay range as well. I'm excited about that. Yeah, I just didn't know what the weather was going to be like. So
no, this time of year it's a crapshoot. It can be gorgeous like it is today. It can be freezing cold and wet. We're actually we're going to be doing this summer 15-year anniversary party for the Survival Podcast, because it's been 15 years in June, and we're probably going to do like a two-parter, like something in the evening that's more, hang out in a bar or whatever. But we're probably going to do for the people that want to do it, that are part of it, an early day shoot there, because it is a pretty cool place. And y'all, if you're in the Fort Worth area, man, you really should join the Fort Bitcoin meetup. It is a really cool group of people. The last one I was at was, I didn't even know Tim Love had that place. I can't think of what it's called now, but it's kind of the Italian themed place that we were at, I guess.
Jamel's.
Yeah. And at one of Tim Love's restaurants. And there were 2 or 3 people from this audience that heard about it, on the show and came in. One I hadn't seen in a while and got to see him again. So come hang out, guys. It's one thing to hold Bitcoin. It's another thing to become part of the Bitcoin community, and you never know who will show up too. I mean, we had Texas Slim at one of them, and I've been on Parker Lewis a bit to try to get him up here. So maybe we'll get him up here sometime and what have you. But Johnathan, thank you for being with us today. We're going to have Johnathan back on in the future, guys, to talk about some of his other initiatives as well. I appreciate you being with us today.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
All right, guys, real quick here, I wanted to remind you that you can help support this show by doing your online shopping where? tspaz.com. Doesn't have a lot to do with Bitcoin today or survivalism, but we are talking about, it is the holiday time of year. And the item of the day I have for you today is one of my favorite little speakers. I was looking around to see if I had mine in here. I don't, but it's the Anker Soundcore 2 Bluetooth speakers. These are IPX7, fully waterproof. You can get 2 of them and they'll pair together. I have like professional AV set up out in my main shop, but in my back shop, about 800 square foot building, I don't have anything out there. I just use these in my smartphone. Really great sound, and they're on sale for 30% off today. So they're like $28 a piece. So you can get 2 of them for what, $56. And you have that full stereo sound. They'll still work independently. They're just great. I love Anker. They're one of my favorite discount brand electronics companies out there. I have sold literally tens of thousands of Anker products over the year. I have never had a single complaint by somebody who said, I got something wrong with my Anker product, and they wouldn't fix it. Now, you sell enough electronics, some of them are going to have problems and all, but they fix the problem, which means they just say, don't worry about it, we'll replace it. So check them out. And remember, you can always help support us. How? Do your online shopping starting at tspaz.com. That's TSPAZ. You do that. No matter what you buy, you will help us out, and we appreciate you for that. Tomorrow, we'll be going back into more of the prepper-themed world with our guest. And Thursday, I got something really cool coming. So I'm still dealing with this issue where I can't really edit, not the way that I typically edit anyway, due to a problem with a computer that should be rectified this week. But rather than risk it, I've asked several members of the expert council to do a live show with me. So we'll have like an expert council panel live on Thursday. I haven't checked email while we're on here with Johnathan, so I don't know who else might say yes to this. But of those who I've invited so far, Nicole Sauce will be on, Tim Toolman Cook, and Nick Ferguson. So we have the permaculture and homesteading world well represented with both Nick and Nicole. Nicole, of course, with business and entrepreneurship on top of it. And then Tim Toolman Cook with that business, entrepreneurship, and the handyman stuff. So, and then, me, myself, and I'm sure some other folks will show up. I invited old man Pugliano, but he's got a doctor's appointment like old men do from time to time. So he probably won't make it. But I got a few others that I've invited. We'll see if they come, and we'll try to do the expert councils with some live panels from time to time, because I think that'll be interesting versus just you guys sending questions to get answers. I also invited Ken Berry, but I'm not going to say whether or not he's going to come yet, because we'll see if he shows up. Anyway, with that, I will catch you guys tomorrow with another guest interview, and then we'll rock through the week. Thanks a lot. I appreciate you being with us today.